Well, looks like I hit the wrong button and we'll rock and roll here. So I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. This is a presentation of CVC Success Group. And the reason we present this is we want to share with our listeners, our watchers, some progressive ideas, things that you can try and look at. And today we've got another one, and we've got a guest on here with us today. So, your host, again, as usual, is myself, and my co hosts are Sharyl Isenhour and Brandi Biswell, all members of our certified coaching team here at the CVC Success Group. So, anyway, our guest today is a gentleman who is a client of mine. I've worked with him for several years, and I was recently in his office and I was able to observe one of the things that he does. I knew he did it, but actually I was able to observe it this time. We're going to share with you this process today that Lee Roff of Lord's Chimney has kicked into gear. So, Lee, let's start out a little bit. You're actually a return guest to my broadcast. So, tell us a little bit about your background. How long you been in the chimney business? Where you at down there? And what's the weather like in Houston, Texas right now?
Like you said, I'm in Houston, Texas. Today, it's a bone chilling about 57 degrees with a misty rain. And that is cold for us. Occasionally we have freezes, but it's a rarity. Yep. And my background, I've been in the chimney industry for about 20 years, running my company, Lord's Chimney. Kind of see. And I'm a military vet, graduated from University of Houston with an entrepreneurship degree, and ready to help.
Yeah. And one of the things you've done, Lee, as part of your college actually education was how you actually worked on building a business and you picked out chimneys and actually went from there and went into the chimney business. Do I have that correct?
Correct. I had a business plan before I started, and we implemented the business plan during the implementation stage of our college diploma. Yes.
Yep. And another thing that you do, you go to a lot of events, not just in the chimney industry, but like you went to the Service Titan big event last year, Pantheon. You go to Vertical Track, which is Tommy Mello's. In fact, Tommy Mello and you have a relationship. And I got to know Tommy through you because I kept hearing you talk about Tommy. And that's how I started a relationship with Tommy, was actually through you. So anyway, we're here today to talk about one of the things, and in fact, if you get Tommy's new book, which is Elevate, that just came out this week, and both Brandi and myself, we're already deep into this book, and she got some real big bonuses wherever she got hers from. Then I bought mine through Amazon, and I didn't get all those bonuses that she got with hers. But anyway, one of the pillars that Tommy talks about in his new book, which describes his journey going from a really small company to a mega-sized home service company with over 30 offices around the country this year, is training. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because Lee, you are doing something that is really a fantastic process, which is when somebody new comes in, and what they've done, they've gone through your hiring, and Sharyl is involved and she does your interviews. She brings people to you after she has interviewed them. You use this assessment in your hiring. If it is going to be an office person, then Brandi actually trains your office people, and that's her relationship to work with your office staff. And you're training the technicians. And also, but you're using certain processes, certain content. So let's share with the people, what do you do? What's unique about Lord's Chimney and the way that you bring a new person on staff?
Well, first, this comes from you, Jerry. We use the actual online training. We use Chimneys 101 for their first week. And we watch it together, and we pause and we talk and we tell stories. And at certain points, we go out and we do hands-on training, and we come back and we hit the play button again, and we let Jerry kind of teach. So all the lesson plans are already pre-done, which makes it incredibly easy. And I did that just because it's like a cheat code. It's because I didn't have to sit down and make slides. I just let Jerry guide us. And then when it's specific to our part of the world or it's something that we don't deal with much, we hit pause and we talk about it. So it's really good. Even when Brandi called me, she was like, "Oh, you're teaching a class." I'm like, "No, never mind. I'll just let Jerry teach for a while." So you have the ability to take a call, step out, step in, but you can actually add what you do locally to the actual class.
Okay. So Cheryl, I'm going to go to you first. What questions would you have to delve into this subject matter deeper with Lee?
Lee, why did you decide to go as in-depth as you do? I know you do it more than any of my other clients. You spend days training. Give us a reason why you push it that hard in the beginning.
Number one, I want to train them with all the knowledge they need to what we do locally. But number two is I want to indoctrinate them into our culture. So it gives me a week to spend face to face with, and it's just as easy to do one as to do 10 people, but I can actually put my culture, I can tell them what matters to me. I can really kind of brainwash them into our way. So that's a week where I can really brainwash them into our culture.
Yep. And we have a question here that came up, Lee. So I'm going to put it up. Of all industries, why did you choose chimneys? He's curious. And this is Justin Field. And I believe Justin is he's up in the state of New Hampshire. So let's answer his question, Lee.
Sure. I had a little bit of background because my dad worked for a company that did chimneys. So I knew a little bit, excuse me. And I wanted a industry where I could be the best, where we could dominate, where I could see where we could fit in and really add. Because in Houston, especially, heating and air conditioning, HVAC, plumbing, electric, it's so developed. There's so many companies like Tommy Mello where they have so much money and so many resources that I couldn't even compete. So I was looking for a niche where I could compete, and this was it.
Okay, so you saw this as a niche, which was a, shall we say, low-cost entry into that you could build from there. And you and your dad were partners in this business until he retired out of the business at this point, but actually is still an owner of the business. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So Brandi, I'm going to go to you. You know, you're very well acquainted with Lee and his processes, and you actually work with his CSR training and office staff and coach them. So what questions would you have for Lee, or what would you want Lee to really expand on in this conversation?
Well, I know you do the week-long training with your CSRs as well, which I think is fantastic. And I know your CSR has told me like just how much she learned during that time and how incredible it was. Can you tell us, is that the same training that you do for your technicians, or is it like, what's the difference? Is it the exact same during the week, or do you teach the CSRs something different?
It's exactly the same. In fact, she was in the class with a technician.
Nice. Okay.
And like I said, doing 1, doing 10, exactly the same amount of effort. Sometimes it's easier with more people because they have conversations and ask questions. When it's one-on-one, while you can go have lunch with them and you can really kind of bond with them, it's almost better to have more people, and it's no more difficult.
Can you walk us through like what that training looks like day by day?
Every single class is different. And they're laughing because they kind of know me. It's all kind of off the cuff, but it's Chimneys 101. So on the first day, besides just putting in their kind of onboarding stuff, getting them in payroll, getting them in Service Titan, getting them in all that stuff so they can clock in and clock out. But then it's hit play and let Jerry guide us along the process. And like I turn probably a day and a half class into a week. But there's a lot of, when we talk about brick, and we'll go get a brick, we'll drop it in water, we'll see how much water it absorbs, we'll take out waterproofer, we have a brick chase that we can lay bricks and we can tuck point and we can put waterproofer on stuff, and we can put crown coat and flash seal and all that kind of stuff. We actually do it. We actually set one of the flue tiles on fire and watch it pop. So we talk about chimney fires at that time, but it's sort of, I mean, it's all as much hands-on as I can get. And you can read the person, because as soon as their heads start to drop or they start to get tired, okay, let's stop. Let's go outside. And minimally, let's just take a walk. That works too. And then come back, and it's much more productive that way.
Thank you.
Okay, so Lee, when you're going through Chimneys 101, and so you're aware, if you're not aware of what Chimneys 101 is, this is actually a 5-hour course. And what it is, you could basically call it an abbreviated basic chimney sweep training, but we're talking about the components of the chimney. We're talking about the vocabulary. But when we present this course, it's presented on a national level. In other words, we're going to be talking about things, Lee, that you're not going to have in Houston, Texas. I mean, a barometric damper is something you're never going to see. There is no appliances using fuel oil in Houston, Texas. When you look at it, your gas vents are all B vent. You don't see any masonry chimneys venting gas furnaces down there, and you don't have any boilers. So my question would be, as you encounter these things that are foreign to Houston, Texas, do you just skip over them, or do you still explain these things to the student?
We explain them too. Now, we don't go in huge in depth, because one of the things that's explained is we don't run into this much. But the fact that you know this can make you an expert in a customer's eyes, because occasionally you get a customer who's had that in their home at another location. And the fact that you know that gets you instantaneous respect. So, and a lot of times we're prepping them for certification exams too. So they need to start getting familiar with these things. Even though Chimneys 101 is not a complete review, you can still go into stuff, and and that way it's repetitious when they get to the point of reviewing for tests.
Okay. Cheryl, your turn. What would you ask Lee next to expand on this topic?
So Lee, when you're training, I've seen how you deal with your people probably more than most on here, and you need to get a one-on-one with them. That's you. Even in a crowd, you have to have a one-on-one. We've worked with DISC for so long. You've got where you can pretty well read the person that way. Do you actually use your DISC in the training when you are working with certain people, getting their personalities?
I do at the beginning. I look and get a general idea, but then once we start, it's a personal relationship. You have to look in their eyes and tell them, because I can look in someone's eyes and tell when they can't understand. I don't know if that's learned. I don't know if it's a gift. My mom was a college professor who taught how to teach. So, and I enjoy it. The teaching part is fun for me. So you have to read the person. You have to know that guys that work out in the field all the time, if they've been in an office for 3 hours, they're not going to do so well. You have to get them up. You have to do all kinds of stuff. You have to stop and ask questions. Sometimes just stopping and having a conversation is a change up. So yes, we use DISC for the assumptive stuff, but at a certain point, how you interact with other people in your class, how do you interact with me, how you interact with me correcting you even occasionally is instructive on how this person's going to react. And sometimes it matches with the DISC, and sometimes it doesn't in certain situations. Because if you put someone under pressure, they're different. Like the adaptive versus the regular in the DISC, you can kind of almost play that out in the class.
Yeah.
So you use body language along with that.
It's just the way I interact with people. I look people in the face. I look at their body language. I tell by their tone of voice. That's how I deal with people.
Okay. So Brandi, what would be your next question for Mr. Roff?
I'm really going to focus on the CSR side of it. So have you always done the week training with CSRs? And if not, what difference did you see in how fast they got up to speed when you started doing the week-long training?
I have not always done it because we have not always had that video. If you went back 20 years, no. We kind of just let them sit beside somebody as we teach, and that was their training. Now we do the CSR training, and then we have all of our calls recorded and they'll just listen to calls for a day or two. And sometimes that's the best because they hear the different situations and they can learn. I tell them all the time that you learn what's good and bad because not all the calls are great, and you can learn from both. And then I'll have CSRs come back to me and be like, hey, I would have done this differently. Is that okay? And that's the kind of questions you want to have with them. But yeah, they learn a lot faster. They're able to communicate with the technicians even more because the technicians don't always speak English to CSRs. So we have to have a middle kind of language that they speak. And it works incredibly well with CSRs. Actually, CSRs sometimes learn faster than the technicians. The technicians come in with preconceived notions and that their ideas are better, whereas the CSRs are just an open slate and they just absorb.
Mhm.
I love it.
So, Brandi, you have worked with these people from the coaching aspect. So, what is your impression of the skill level of a CSR, of a dispatcher, of an office person after they've gone through this week with Lee? What do you see as the benefit of what he's doing?
I mean, it goes beyond just even the learning. So obviously the learning that week is very important, but also what I've seen is they develop a relationship with Lee during that week because they're remote. So that can be hard to develop, but they get to know Lee really well over that week, which I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I'm glad you injected that, because one of the things that Lee does is his office staff all works remote. They are none of them, and he has Service Titan has his software, so he is able to do this with a remote office staff, because Lee, there's none of your office staff sitting in your office. Is that correct?
That's correct. They have the option to come in, but they choose not to.
They choose not to. So anyway, this is a process that we started professing some years ago, and it's what we call facilitated training. Because what Lee's doing is, he said it, he is using our content, and then he will play it for a brief period of time, could be 3 minutes, could be 5 minutes, and then he will stop the video, and then he will go into his own in-depth explanation of how the Lord's way of doing this is. And when I say the Lord's, that is the Lord's chimney way of doing that, before somebody accuse me wrong. But also, Lee, like I said, I was there just a couple weeks ago, and I was able to observe this in action. And what you did that day was, you came out of the classroom that afternoon and you walked through your entire warehouse and you pointed out every material that you use. And I was actually sitting there watching this, and you're telling them what the different chemicals are. You showed them where you have the dyed mortars already made up. You talked about all the chemicals, all the parts, everything in your warehouse. You described to these people and did it with even them putting their hands on. How important is that in this process?
Everybody learns in a different way. Some people don't need that. Some people do. What I found, especially technicians out in the field, they need hands-on. They not only need hands-on, but they need a break from sitting in a chair. But it's really good to, and especially if you can get them asking questions, especially if they can put their hands on it. And then you can ask them to repeat what you just said on how you install it to see if they've actually comprehended it. It works incredibly well for any type of person, because you can, and I custom tailor it. Every time is not the same, like we said earlier. So some people spend more time hands-on, some people spend less. And it's a cases, I wish there was just a standard SOP, but people don't come with operating manuals. So that's the way I do it.
Now, in Chimneys 101, you also have written quizzes that are in English right now, but we're actually having these translated into Spanish right now for Hispanic workers, because you have some workers, you are in South Texas, so there's a lot of workers that Spanish is their native language. So do you use the quizzes with these people? Do you have them take the quizzes and look at their scores?
Yes, it's vital to check if they're comprehending, and also if they know they're taking quizzes, they pay attention more. Okay. It's that accountability piece as we go. And one of the things I'm excited about the Spanish questions is my employees that speak Spanish perfectly fine, but the translation of chimney terms in Spanish becomes more of an issue. So a lot of times they revert back to the English chimney terms, which is okay because the customer often doesn't know what they mean anyways.
Yeah.
But going back and forth is more difficult just with chimney terms.
Right. What we found out in the way we did this, and we've already translated all of our basic chimney sweep technician training questions into Spanish. And I just engaged a translation company to do the Chimneys 101 earlier this week. But here's the issue. In my research of people that are bilingual, and if they natively learned Spanish as they were children growing up, and if they came from an Hispanic household, what's happening is that for life, you still think in that native language. So an Hispanic person may be fluent in English, but their brain is actually working in Spanish. So what they do is they read something in English, they then have to translate it into Spanish in their brains. Then they have to translate it back to English in order to do the tests. So that's the reason we did the translations. So when hopefully this will be up a couple days on Chimneys 101. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how your people react with this Spanish version, because the problem is I don't read Spanish. I can't speak in Spanish. So it's kind of, let's just say it is Greek to me, because I can't even see what I have on there if it's accurate. But I've got a couple Spanish speaking people that are reviewing to make sure they are accurate. So Sharyl, let's go to you next. What would be the next question that you would have for Lee?
Lee, we're continually trying to get more than one in training at a time. Do you see a lot more ease at people and intermix if you've got more than one in training, where they've got somebody there that's with them while they're learning?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even a mix of CSR to technician, the different questions, and even a technician who knows more, to have someone who's less experienced than them gives them the questions a customer would ask. So quite often the questions you get in basic classes are customer questions, which is good. That's what they need to learn. So yeah, more people creates a more relaxed environment, creates dialogue. That's not even me. And when I've stepped out to take a call or something, because I do all the time, because I have to work too, they have questions, they have conversations. So when I come back, they have a list of questions. We have a whiteboard. They'll write questions on a whiteboard for me when I walk in. And it's awesome to have more than one. Like I said, 10 or one, sometimes 10's easier than one.
Yeah. And Lee, let's add this in. When you moved into your new facility a year or so ago, I forget how long you've been in there, you now have remodeled it where you have a training room, you have a television set in there, and that's what they're seeing this on. They're not looking at it on a small computer screen. You've got a HD TV mounted up on the wall that they see this, and you can regulate the sound. Do you see where having that space is critical to roll this system out?
Yes. And it's critical for a new employee, their first impressions on, is this quality? Do I take this serious? If we were in a cubicle with a monitor, it doesn't have the same effect. So having more quality, it sounds almost bad, but finishes, nicer chairs, nicer environment, makes an already person who's coming into an industry they have no clue of, and a lot of their friends have never heard of, it makes it more legit when they walk in the door.
Yeah. And I recently trained at Brandi's new learning loft. And the neat thing was Brandi sat through one day of the class, and she's over there on the couch, just as comfortable as can be. But yeah, having this is really a neat thing for you. So Brandi, what would be your next question that you would have for Lee?
So Lee, because your CSRs are remote, once a month we meet with them, you, me, and them. Do you find that helpful just to keep in touch and just to go over any concerns they have?
Absolutely. Yeah. When it's more difficult when you don't see the person every day. I just talked about looking in someone's eyes. That's a different thing. And that's how I communicate with people. I have to have that interaction. When you don't have it, it's hard. And you have to have certain types of people who can do that, because there's some people who just sort of drift off and you sort of never see them again almost. They're there, but they're not mentally bought in. So I think there's a mix of even having dinners or something so that you can actually kind of bond. It sounds a little weird, but you need it. You need that bonding time. But yeah, it's getting into their head and really, they need to know. I always say, I sort of bare my soul. This is why I do this. This is why we do this. And you have to know, because especially like CSRs, they're going to have to make decisions. And when they know why we do what we do, they can make better decisions. If they just knew this was the rule, it's not always. In certain situations, you have to make decisions. And if you don't know why the rule is what it is, you don't know when to break it.
No.
Yeah, agree.
So, Brandi, let me take a question to you here. You have an office staff that you train intently, but your office staff is not remote at Blues Brothers. So, in other words, your people can go to someone else in your office and utilize that other person. I'm going to call it as a crutch where they don't know the answer. So, in a situation like Lee has, where these are remote people, in other words, there is nobody in the next office that can help them. They would have to be making a phone call or a text or a telegram to get that help. Do you see where this is key in him being able to build this remote office staff that he has in his long-term strategic plan?
Well, I think it's easy today with technology, right? Because they can pick up the phone, they can get on a Zoom call together. I sometimes get on Zoom with them, like especially if we're looking at something at Service Titan, because you can tell me what you're trying to do, but sometimes I need to see it visually. So I think with today's technology, it's so much easier than it used to be to help each other remotely or even hybrid.
Okay, good enough. Well, we're going to roll around for one more time, one more question. So, Sharyl, this will be your last one. What else would you ask Lee to dig into this process he has developed down there?
I guess the next thing would be, at what point? I know you're training for a week, okay? Is there a point when you know they have it, when they're going to make a good employee, or whether they're just going to float by?
I would like to tell you that I know every time, but that's not the truth. I have some people I think will absolutely have it that don't eventually. Eventually they have to go out on their own and do their actual job. They can't stay in the protective confines of our, training facility. But yeah, I do think that some people get why we do what we do. You can kind of tell culturally if they fit or not, or if they think it's a joke. Because I'm real big on, hey, that customer they're called us because they need help. It's our job to help them. And if they go, even if they don't pick us, if they pick a bad way because we didn't educate them enough, that's our fault. My employees give me a hard time because even when someone who hasn't even done business with us in our town has a chimney issue, I think it's our fault because we did not market to them, educate. We did something wrong because our people, which is our city, whether it's Beaumont or Houston, the two cities we're in, if they're not making good decisions, educated decisions, that's our job. And we need to make sure we take care of our people.
Jerry, I'd like to do a segue here if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I've known you a long time, Lee, or it seems like a long time. You not only just train your new hires, you train your regular people extensively. So I just want to put that out. You never stop training.
Every day.
Yeah. Okay, Brandi, what else would you have to inject in this?
I guess I would want to know, what do you look for when hiring a CSR, just for our audience? What are those qualities that you look for? And especially, and is it different since they are going to be remote?
I trust Sharyl for a lot of that stuff. That's the honest truth. I mean, Sharyl at this point, when she has a technician or a CSR, tells me this person's good. And I know from actual experience, I'm not good at the hiring process. My judge in an interview is someone that I like to hang out with. That's not always the best employee. So I trust her opinion. I mean, it's stacked opinions, but I trust her more than me for a lot of this stuff because I know that's one of my weak points. So you hire someone to do something you're not good at.
So Sharyl, can I flip that question to you? When you're hiring for Lee, because you know his CSRs are going to be remote, do you look for different qualities than you would if you were hiring for a CSR that was going to be in an office?
Yeah, you've got to have someone that has the ability to do things on their own. They don't have that one-on-one with somebody watching over their shoulder. They have to be consistent with what they do. I have to know. I actually look, hopefully during the interview, they bring me into their home. I know if there's 12 kids running around. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. It's hard when you're trying to be a mom and trying to be a CSR for a company, because that's when you're working in the winter months. I mean, it's full time. There's not a lot of time. And I admire that some of these ladies, I have had one there before, and the first thing she says, they won't be here during season. And you just, that's what you kind of look for it anyway, but there's different qualities. They just have to have that persistence and not have to have an overseer, if that's a good word.
And Jerry, one more thing I would add. One thing I love about the remote worker is Lee has a very top-notch CSR, probably one of the top-notch ones that I work with out of everybody. And
be careful, your girls could be hearing you right now.
Well, I'm saying work with, not in my office.
Okay.
They know they're my favorites in my office.
Okay.
She is moving though. So she's moving soon. And I love it because she's moving to another state, but she's still going to be working for Lee. So in a case where if she was in the office, he would be losing her. He's getting to keep this trained CSR.
Yeah. And not only that, she's someone that we see we can move up to a higher level in the company. So, Brandi, does that cover everything you got or anything else you got on your mind?
That covers mine.
Okay. So, Lee, one more question. They go through this week of training. Are they done with training, or how do you train continuously and ongoing? Because that is also a very important part that many people miss.
We train a little bit every day. So we have our morning meetings have training in them. At little tidbits, as you would say. Also, they get assigned classes online. So we pay them to watch those classes as if they were at work.
Let's hold that right there. If you're listening to this, I want you to make sure that you heard what he just said. He believes in training so strongly that he is actually compensating them to do this on their own time. They have to follow the process. They're using our platform. They have to give the code words and all that. But then he is compensating them for ongoing continuous training. I wanted to reinforce that. Keep going, Lee.
Yep. Yeah, because every payroll, they turn in their certificates for the classes that they've actually gone. Even if it doesn't have CEUs, they have certificates, and that counts for what they get paid for those classes. So if we have a short day or anything else, they just go home and train. In our world, we have hurricanes. We have, I don't know if there's snowstorms. We don't really run to that much, although we had freeze last year. But that allows them to train when they can't get to work for any weird reason. So I never have anybody who calls me and says, I don't have enough hours, because they have hours that they can get. They're choosing not to do it. So it ends that conversation. Plus, we do scheduled, and sometimes it's just a couple of guys. If it's a slow day, we'll go out and we'll lay some brick. We'll tuck point, we'll put on a crown. We'll measure for chase tops or caps. We'll do hands-on stuff too, in a scheduled kind of way as well. So we're constantly training. Obviously in the off season more than during, just because they're so busy, but it never stops. As soon as you stop, because I always say to every employee, you can take Chimneys 101 now, and if you take it in a year, you're going to get something totally different out of it, because you're in a different place in your head.
Yeah. And
so
it sounds like
all these classes can be taken over and over again.
Yeah, and it sounds like we're going to be re-recording it before long to make Brandi happy. So just so you're aware of as far as that goes. So we got a comment here came up. Good job, Lee. Glad things are working well. Training is key. Profits with a dollar mark. And I'm not sure who Facebook user is, because StreamYard sometimes doesn't identify people. But Lee, here's what you did, just to summarize it up. You put the process into effect. You put it together. And then on top of that, you continued the process. When you look at it, one of the people that you follow greatly is Tommy Mello. And Tommy Mello, I think, has been a significant influence on you, to the point that it almost drove me crazy, because it was always Tommy said this, Tommy said this, Tommy said this. So I finally had to meet Tommy and got to know Tommy. But what you're doing, you are following the course of action. And that was Chuck Roydhouse that just put that message up a while ago. So anyway, you set the course of action and you're following it to a T. So anything else you want to add into this before we check out of here today?
No, just bond with your employees.
Okay.
It's important that you kind of bare your soul. They know why you do what you do. Okay. And then I'd like to say they always take care of you. That's not true either. But they're more likely to make decisions that benefit the company.
That's correct. So anyway, this is a book I wrote a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago. I forget when we rolled it out, but the title of it is Step Up to Success: How to Grow a Novice into a Top Performer. Lee, this is the process that you're following. Would that be correct? Basically, what I put down in Step Up to Success.
You were correct, sir.
Okay, so thank you. So here's the thing. If you see me at convention at NCSG in a couple of weeks, I'll have some copies there. I'm not going to be selling books. I'm going to give you a book. So if you come up to me, check us in the trade show. We're going to have some books there. We look forward to talking to you, and we'd love to put processes together for you that can help turn your business in where you want it to take. So Lee, I appreciate you taking your time out. Believe it or not, folks, he had to go to Beaumont this morning and drove about an hour and a half to get to there. And then if you've never driven a Texas freeway, it is where they eat their young there, because these are guys with big old four-wheel drive pickup trucks with big hats and big cowboy belt buckles going down the highway, and you take your life in your own hands, don't you, Lee?
Yep, 18-wheelers everywhere.
18-wheelers and everybody, and it is dog eat dog on those freeways. Every time I go to Texas, it's like they talk about New York traffic. No, they teach them, they go out for the kill in Texas. But anyway, we want to thank you for joining us today on this episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. If you're watching it live, we really appreciate it. And if you're watching it on the replay, and if you need to set your sights and get a strategic plan together, you're seeing all of our email addresses here on the screen. We are a certified chimney coaching team. This is the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. So reach out to us. We'll all be in the Mohican Sun in just a couple weeks at the convention. Reach out to us. I would also tell you this. If you haven't watched our colleague, Brandi Biswell, she did one heck of a job Saturday night at the Firetime EDX thing, and she presented an 18.5-minute presentation with no slides, no notes, that talked, and seriously, folks, that young lady, Cheryl, did she knock it out of the park Saturday night?
She did.
I forgot like 6 points though.
Give it up, Brandi.
I just want everybody to know it could have been better.
But then it would have been 20 minutes.
Yeah,
You didn't have that long.
But Brandi, what you did, no notes. Okay. I mean, seriously. And I know how hard you worked to put this together. And I tell you, it was a performance worthy of a TED performance. What I saw you do that night, it was simply out of the park. So the whole thing is, if you want to see Brandi's presentation, you can go onto my Facebook page. Brandi, I presume it's shared on your Facebook page, but you can watch the recording. Brandi's presentation came in at about the 46-minute mark. And Grant and Tim both did great presentations too. But Brandi, tell the folks what your presentation was geared to Saturday night.
Well, the whole evening was the past, present, and future. So Grant had the past and I had the present and Tim had the future. So mine was really about the present, and especially now we're hiring a lot of Generation Z. I just onboarded 2 Generation Zs this week. And so just the differences in the way that they think and work.
Yeah. And Brandi, one of the things that I think was so important was you learned a lot of these lessons the hard way because of your kids and also through the hiring. You told the story about a young man that came there dressed in coveralls, and you were somewhat taken aback. And then when you found out he was trying to dress the part to impress you when he came on. But, I've known you many years, but I've seen from what you've learned, I've seen your acceptance of millennials actually increase quite a bit from where it was. And, I've learned a lot from you. Cheryl's learned a lot from me. And that's what we do here. We learn from each other every single day. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining us today on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. And if you're watching us on the replay, we certainly appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. If Brandi and Cheryl are going to do this next week, because I've got an appointment that I'm going to have to be in and I won't be on it. So if there's an episode next week, it's up to those 2 ladies. But to be honest with you, they really enjoy doing it when I'm not here. So you see them shaking their heads. So there will be a presentation next week. I won't be on it. I may be listening to it in the distance and commenting, but it's going to be those two ladies next week. So appreciate you joining us. Reach out to us here at CVC Success Group. Let us know how we can help you turn your business dreams into your business realities. And with that, we'll see you next time.